What's up, podcast land? It's your girl Niche, and welcome back to another episode of Laughing and Crying. This is a podcast that values all relationships, including and sometimes most importantly, the ones that we have with ourselves. You know, relationships we have with ourselves, it's important. If you're new, welcome. Guarantee you're gonna have some fun for sure. And on today's episode, we're gonna start out with a story, and then we're gonna get into our conversation about grief. I know it's heavy. Sometimes it can be, but it also can have a lot of hope and joy in it. So don't click off just yet. Listen. So let's get into it. So I have somebody in the building. Guess you guys didn't expect that. Got somebody in the building. Yaviri, say what's up to the people.
What's up, people?
You know that I've gotten the pleasure of getting to know you over the past couple of weeks. Well, actually, it's like months now.
Yeah, now it's been about a month or two.
I think we're besties.
I think we are.
But I know the audience doesn't know you quite well, so tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a mom of two men. They are grown and out of the house.
Grown.
Yeah, empty nesters.
Somebody's son.
My husband and I have actually known each other and been dating since high school. And I'm also a grandma. So
She doesn't look it. She doesn't look it.
Well, thank you. Yes, and he is just wonderful. It's nice to be able to spoil and return.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
And I also work in communications, and then I do photography as well. And essential oils is kind of my jam too. So I kind of dabble in a lot of different things, and I like to be creative. So as long as there's some creativity involved in it, I'm probably doing something in that regard.
I love the creativity. The creativity is welcome here, man. Okay, tell me what essential oil I need.
Oh, girl, we can have a session to find out exactly what essential oil you need.
Okay.
But honestly, one of my favorites is peppermint, especially in the summertime. It's a good way to cool down the body.
Oof. I didn't know that.
Yes. Oh, yes. Peppermint. I put it with a little bit of witch hazel, some water, and that's like my summertime spread. Down? It cools you right down. I use it before a workout. Mm-hmm. Yep.
See, we're here to talk about grief, but she's hooking you up. Take some notes. Peppermint, witch hazel, and water. Spray it.
That's it. I'm telling you. And the brand does matter, but we'll talk about that some other time.
We'll talk about it later. I love it. Okay. So I heard you have a story for us.
I do. So it's actually a little bit of how my husband was introduced to my family.
In-law story.
Yeah. We're gonna give a little tea today.
Okay, a little tea. I love it.
So he and I had been dating, and we then found out that I was pregnant, and I won't get into those details. We all know how that happens. And so he had not met my family before that point. Right. So of course, when I tell my mom, I'm expecting, and she's going ballistic and crying and all of that stuff, they want to meet him. He's like, of course, I'm going to come to the house. We'll do all that. Well, I also have two older brothers. And so my parents didn't want my brothers in on that particular conversation when he first came over.
Right.
So he comes in. Of course, he gets the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th degree from my mom and my dad.
100%.
And after, they met him, they felt much more comfortable. It wasn't all perfect. I mean, we still all had a lot of questions about how we were going to do this, how this was all going to work out. But of course, my two brothers, I'm very close to them. And one is 4 years older than me. The other one's 5 years older than me. And they were thick as thieves. So they tell me that they want to take him for a drive.
Oh, no.
So, I've watched enough movies to know, like, when someone says they want to take someone for a drive, that's usually not really good, right? Like, the person may not come back. So, although when I told him, I kind of said, hey, my brothers just want to, get to know you, hang out with you. I didn't really use the phrase a drive.
I mean, good. Okay. Probably.
I don't want to make it more uncomfortable than it probably needed to be.
Right.
So they go on this drive, and I it's funny because my husband says that he remembers it not being as long as I remember. And I don't know if it was because I was stressing out.
Right. You were probably like,
Yeah, I was literally like, what is going on? And at that time, we're not talking like as much access to cell phones as we have now and all this.
right.
So it's not like I could call him or call them and say, what's going on? Like, give me the
Right.
scoop. So for me, I felt like it was hours that they'd been gone. And when they come back, he's in the car, and at this point, I guess they got him a little tipsy.
Oh, shoot.
And when I say a little tipsy, he was
Like drunk.
like sick, like yeah,
Oh, no.
oh yeah, and yelling, "I love you!" like out of the out of the car. So my younger brother, I call them Dickie and Richie.
Uh-huh.
They both have the same name. I won't get it. They both have the same name.
Okay.
So we had to have nicknames for them. So my brother Dickie looks at me and he goes, "He's a keeper." I think we're good. We're good. And my other brother's laughing and going, "Yep, we're good. We're good. We're gonna take him home now." So they ended up taking him home. And my heart was still beating out of my chest because I had like you just make up all this stuff in your
Yeah.
head about what's going on. And apparently they just got him drunk enough that they said that they could interrogate him properly to
Yo,
find
this is
out
a whole new angle. They
if he
were
was a good
pros.
guy for me. So I appreciated the tactic. As far as it was better, than having him go missing.
I
So
know. I mean, right. Your pros were like, not on my watch, not with my sister. Man, we need
yes.
to have hubby on the podcast next. I want to hear his side of the story.
Oh, he'll tell you. He actually tells it a lot funnier than I do.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, I love
because
it.
he experienced it, and we laugh about. I mean, it's been almost close to 30 years. We laugh about that moment all the
Yeah.
time. My brothers still laugh about that moment all the time.
That is so funny. I wish I had brothers that would do that. I have a younger brother, so he's like the baby, but to have two older brothers, I'm like, come get Dre. Come.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, they definitely. I mean, I still am. I'm the baby. I'm the only
Yeah.
girl. So I was definitely spoiled by them both and by
Princessa.
my dad. So he I don't think he realized what he was walking into.
Right? And you guys were how old at the time?
Oh my, 17.
Oh, he was, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
17. 17. So, I mean, I think he handled it all like a champ. Here we are. We're still together.
Right.
So
How
obviously
many
something went
years?
right. They didn't scare him off. So,
Right. How many years are you guys married?
oh goodness. Now together, 30.
30 years after that?
30 years.
And he might have peed a little?
I'll have to ask him.
Well, that's
I
love,
know
girl.
they definitely bonded. They definitely bonded
Right.
because they definitely brought him into the fold like a brother. So I think
Yeah.
that it all definitely was a bonding experience.
Yeah.
And really a funny one that we can look back on now and just kind of get some laughs about the silliness of it all. And I get it, older brothers, they want to protect their younger baby
Right.
sister. So I
So sweet.
appreciated it, but I was scared out of my mind.
You're like, what did I do to him? He's not going to come back.
Right. I was like, wait a minute, that's not gonna work for me.
I love that. I love that. And I also love that we're gonna get to hear a little bit more about your brothers
Yes.
and your relationship.
Yes.
Because we're gonna go into a conversation about good grief.
Yes.
And I know that for a lot of people, grief signals different things in their head, different triggers. So definitely if you're not in a place in your grief where you have those triggers kind of under control, or if you've processed, this might not be the best episode. Make sure you're staying safe within yourself emotionally. This is like a trigger warning, I guess, for you. But we're definitely going to dive into your story, which I'm so excited about, and dive into this topic of grief that nobody really wants to talk about, but everybody needs to talk about, you know?
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. And grief could be anything really and truly. To me, it's like ending a chapter, starting a new one, or starting a parallel one. And it can mean, like I said, it can mean so many things for so many people. So even if you're not in a season of grief as far as a death, these principles and things that we're going to talk about might still apply. Do you have anything to add as far as like before we get
Well, I would say
started?
that, yeah, definitely grief is, I know that it wasn't something that I fully understood until I actually had my own personal experience.
Yeah,
You know, it is hard for people to sometimes talk about it,
yeah,
e- or even how to interact with someone who's going through it,
yeah.
right?
It's
Because there's
intimidating.
always, yeah, there's like an awkwardness or
Hmm.
there's not, like with anything else, right? There's not like a guide or a book that can tell you how someone may or may not be feeling after experiencing something like that. So it is really sort of, to me, uncharted waters when it
Yeah,
comes to that kind of a loss. And like you
yeah,
said, it could be a loss of many things. People grieve lots of things. I
yeah,
mean, when you lose a job, people do
yeah,
sometimes, if it's a job you really loved and a job that you know, were doing well, and something happens and you no longer have that, you can be grieving that. A lot of
yeah,
people grieve the loss of their pets.
yeah,
You know, I've had that experience. And again, until someone goes through that, you're like, a pet, it's like, they become part of the family. So
yeah.
it's all of these nuances that people don't always understand. Relationships, when people lose relationships,
Friendships.
not everybody bounces back, you
Yeah,
know, as easily as someone else might.
yeah. Yeah, and I was gonna say, like for me, like it was a weird type of grief. Like when I got married, like I grieved a lot of my singleness, and I grieved a lot of what I thought marriage was gonna be,
Mm-hmm.
because my parents were divorced, so I didn't get to see it growing up, and so I had all of these like expectations and dreams about what it was gonna look like, and it didn't. It's still beautiful, it's still wonderful as I'm learning how to appreciate it in the space that I'm in, but I know a lot of my grief came from that for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's It's a whole different, like you said, there's different chapters.
Yeah,
And then when you close
I
one
like
and you
that.
open another, there's going to be a time where you kind of have to work out what that closure is going to look like for you.
Yeah, that's a good
And then
word.
yeah,
Hmm.
and then there's a whole process that
Yeah,
I actually, you know, I've heard about the process, like, you know,
yeah,
the seven processes, you know, you hear about it, you do all it, but it doesn't really hit you until it hits you.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Speaking of, I know your story with grief is about your brother.
mhm.
So tell me about the call you got.
So it was in September. It was about 8 years ago. Basically, my brother was living in another state. We weren't living in the same state, but we talk. Like I said, my brothers and I are very close.
Yeah,
So we talk all the time. So it wasn't um, weird for him to
yeah,
call me.
right.
And so when he called, he said, "Hey, you know, I got to tell you something." And when he said that, there was a tone in his voice that was just different. You know, I think people know, like when someone's going to call you with some not good news, that it just, the tone changes. So, you know, he said, "I went to the doctor because he hadn't been
Mhm.
feeling well. He had been saying he hadn't been feeling well, and I got a diagnosis, and I
Oh
think
man.
a lot of it is blurry because I remember only one word from him
Yeah,
really clearly, but I think he's, you know, I said, "Hey, like, what is it? Like, it can't be that bad." And then he said, "I have stage 4 cancer." And when he said stage 4 cancer, I really kind of blanked after that.
yeah,
Everything else was kind of like, I think I've gotten like autopilot mode where I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Like, we're going to figure it out. Are you going to the doctors? Yes,
yeah,
I'm doing this. Did you talk to mom? Yes, I called mom first. And did you call our other brother? Yes, I've talked to him." And so it kind of really got into autopilot at that moment.
yeah.
It wasn't really until I hung up the phone that the words sunk in.
Hmm.
And then I I just it sunk in, but it still didn't really hit. I don't
Yeah,
think it really hit me until later on that night where I was like, "Oh my God, stage 4 is not good."
yeah.
Like that's not, and it was colon cancer. So, and I didn't know this beforehand. I didn't know that colon cancer, when it's caught early, can be one of the most treatable cancers.
I didn't know that
Uh,
either.
I did not know that. And at the time when my brother got his diagnosis, he had just turned 41.
Mm.
So we had actually just been with all of our family for his birthday. He had gotten a beach house. And so we had all been together because for some reason he really wanted to just have like this big thing for his 41st, because we really didn't do anything for the 40th.
Yeah.
And so we were living here still in North Carolina, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to make it. And I do recall my mom saying, "Hey, we don't do this very often. You guys really need to get here."
Mm.
And my husband and my mom have a very good relationship now. And so my husband said, "Hey, if your mom wants us there, we need to be there. Like
Yeah.
this is important." And so we were all together for his 41st birthday, which was that July. Um, and I recall him saying that he had been having some stomach issues, that he
Mm.
was gonna go to the doctor, just check it out, that it wasn't anything, like it wasn't a big deal, but he wasn't feeling the greatest. And so, when you have certain things happening in your body, some things do seem normal. Like, oh, you're having some
Yeah.
issues with your stomach. You
Okay.
just go,
Yeah.
or you take some antacid or Pepto, you take something, right? And
Right.
then you feel better. So when he said it, I guess around that time, they weren't doing colonoscopies until people were about 50.
Mm.
And so it wasn't something that they would normally do as a
Check for,
test
yeah.
for him, yeah, or check for. But because I guess when he talked to the doctor and told them all of his symptoms in totality, they said, "We
Okay, we
think
need to do this.
we need to do this." And then that's when he got the diagnosis. Um, and it was rough. It was rough because we didn't live in the same state.
Mm.
And so that was very difficult. We talked a lot on the phone. I don't know if we did too much FaceTime. I don't even know if FaceTime was that big of a thing at that point where we
Right.
really did that much. We really didn't. It was more phone calls. And so it just was something that I had never dealt with before.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me. But then he went through the chemo, he, did all of that.
Well,
Um, at the time he had someone who was taking care of him and helping him, and my parents were flying down as well to help.
mm.
I was supposed to fly down to see him, and that was in probably like February at this point, but something happened with my flight. I wasn't able to get there.
Yeah.
And the next thing I knew, there was a couple of different emergencies that were happening. And so from Colorado, they actually had to fly my brother back to Rhode Island, which is where we were
Yeah.
originally raised. And so when he got back home, I still thought, I've got some time. Let me try to figure out, how to see him and how to get there. Well, unfortunately, I never got there.
Mm.
So
I
he
hear
passed
you.
away. Yeah, he passed away in March, which is a double-edged sword for me, because one of the things growing up, all of them really celebrated my birthday. Like I had yes, and that is one thing that I still to this day, like my husband knows, Christmas is cool, but my birthday is amazing. Like
Girl, I'm a birthday girl too. I'm like, my birthday.
I'm
It's
like,
a
it
holiday.
has to
It's a
be
holiday.
right. It has to be all about my birthday. It's got
Right.
to be done big. We've got to just like celebrate. And he knows, like, I start singing the Happy Birthday to Me song starting March 1st, drive him crazy for the whole month.
Hilarious.
And so they always did my birthday big. My birthday ends up being on March 22nd. He passed away on the 26th. So a month that was like so treasured for me
Yeah.
really became a double-edged sword, because
Yeah.
I'm like, it's my birthday. I love my birthday, but now my brother's passed, and I loved my brother and I want to celebrate him. But how do I do that when I feel so bad? Like it was like an emptiness that I and that's like the only word I think I can use to explain
Yeah.
how much of a loss it was. Even in pictures, I remember like I would always be the one in the middle. I'd
Yeah.
have both my brothers on the side of me. And it was so weird when, after everything, I took the first photo with my older brother, and it was just me and him.
Mm,
It felt different and it
yeah.
felt weird because it's like we were the third, like, where's my third wheel? Like,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like,
And I'm like,
where's
how
my
much
other friend?
it's so much impact. And I love how you said you don't even know what word to use because I hear that a lot, whether it be like moms who lose babies or, who lose parents, people who lose parents. It's like, what word do I even say to describe
Hmm.
how this
It's
feels?
it's hard. There's not really a word. It was almost like the wind. So they do, for me, I know a lot of times like I will carry different emotions in different parts of my body.
Yeah. No, that's real.
So for me with grief, and I have heard this, that grief really hits you in your chest.
Mm,
And I really did feel like when I got the news that I was breathless, like I couldn't breathe, like
like
I couldn't catch
anguish.
my breath.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I had heard that but never experienced it. And I thought this is what they talk about when
I
they
just got
say
like
like
goosebumps, man.
it really was one of those. And even the day when I got the phone call, I was at work. Not
Oof.
the best place to be when
Yeah.
you get a phone call like that. And I remember my coworkers asking me if I was okay to drive. And I don't even remember if I had called. I don't even think I called my husband right away to tell him. I think I just got in the car. And again, I was on autopilot.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm going to get home. I'm going to get home. I'm going to get home. When I parked, I did call him because I couldn't get out of the car.
Mm,
I was like, like I couldn't
yeah.
physically get out of the car. And he came, he got me. I was like in tears, like Devis couldn't even talk. And I remember at that time, our oldest had already graduated and was out of the house. We just had the youngest at home. And I remember him telling him, like, I don't want him to see me like this because he doesn't know yet. And I don't want this to be
The
how
way
we
he
tell
finds out.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had him go upstairs and then, went, grabbed me and tried to get me functional so
Yeah.
I could, you know, and then it was a whirlwind. And I think people don't talk about that part either, the whirlwind of when you're planning for a funeral and you're planning all of these things that have to happen after someone passes.
Yeah.
And my grandmother at the time had passed away, but she was old. She was 88. She had a lot of
Yeah.
ailments.
Right.
It's like
It's a
different.
different feeling. Hmm.
It is. It's a different feeling. At least it was for me. And so, having to go back home and that flight and then having to stay like in mode of we've got to get these things done. And then, he has three children. And
Yeah.
so had to make sure that they were okay and that my parents were okay because when
Yeah.
he passed, he actually passed in my parents' home.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and actually my older son was there when it happened and they were not supposed to resuscitate, but something happened with that paperwork and so they did resuscitate. So then he passed away again at the hospital. So that in of itself, just for my parents, like knowing that was really, really hard because they kind of had to go through it twice. All of those things, like all of those details. But honestly, when the funeral came around, I think you just go into this mode where you just need to get the stuff done and you're not really thinking about it.
Yeah. Like it doesn't
Um,
quite get
yeah,
you. And I've heard
yeah,
that people who say like, there's all these people that crowd around you when something like that happens. And then when you do finally come to, when it does finally hit you, it's like everybody's gone.
yeah, yeah, because you're still in it and they've already
Yeah.
moved on because it doesn't affect them the same way it affects you. It's true.
Yeah.
It's very, and
How,
it's not anyone's fault. It's not anyone who's not
right, right, right,
trying,
right.
it's just that they may not realize the impact that it's had. And, like they say, life does have to move on. But yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. And then for me, because I'm in communications, I also write. There was a sense of expectation that I would
That you
be
were
the one
gonna,
that would speak
yeah.
at my brother's
And
funeral.
that you would even have something to say.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so I was asked, and my response was, I don't have the words, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And I remember when I said it at the moment, I just was, I felt kind of defeated, I think,
Yeah.
because in a way it was like, I should be doing this. Normally I would love to have that moment to highlight him and highlight all of that, but I
Right.
just didn't have it in me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, nope. My older brother and his best friend went ahead and they barely got through it.
Mm.
And so, and I felt bad kind of putting that on my older brother as well, like, that burden. But I knew at the time I
Like you
just
couldn't
wasn't
do
ready.
it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wasn't ready. And I actually wasn't ready until about 2 or 3 years later when I
Yeah.
put pen to paper and finally wrote everything I would have said.
Let me stop you there
Um,
because I definitely want to talk about that. But
yes.
I want to take like a little bit of a sidestep and ask. So life moved on, you know.
Hmm.
How did it impact like your grieving impacts like the relationships around you, like with your kids and with your husband? How did like all of the grief kind of settle in
Well,
there?
I'll say that the blessing in it, if there was any, was my husband had experienced his own loss of his own brother
Okay.
earlier on in our relationship. So he knew that feeling because they
Yeah.
were also very close. So
Yeah.
he really helped me through that because he had already experienced it to the point where later on when I was reflecting, I had to tell him, when you were going through it, I don't think I was as supportive and as good to you as you were to me because I didn't
Wow.
understand it.
Yeah. That's a that's a huge point. Like just having that reflection and it moving forward, which I want to get into later of just like kind of putting intentionality towards like what do we do when we know someone is grieving. There is no right or wrong. Obviously we do the best that I can, but but there's definitely like tips that
Mm-hmm.
we can keep in mind in our back pocket of like how do we approach this that could benefit the person grieving the most. So
Oh, yeah.
I love that you say that. Like you even had that reflection. What did it look like when you reflected on that?
I really did a lot of the things you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
I recall I probably had said a couple of times, move on. Don't ever say
Hmm.
that to someone who's grieving.
Yeah.
I know that I probably said like, I don't I don't understand why you're still thinking about it. And I
Wow.
hope I didn't say it quite like that, but I might
Yeah.
have. There were just some things that when I was thinking back, I was like, oh boy, I was not like good
The
at
most
this. Like
sympathetic. Yeah.
I didn't support him in the way I probably should have. And again, it was also I didn't understand. I didn't know. Like I knew it was a loss. I knew it was a grief, but I didn't get it until it happened. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it.
Yeah.
150, if not 1,000%. I get it.
And let's normalize
Totally
it, right? Like
understand.
we've all said things we shouldn't have said when somebody was
Hmm.
grieving. And I think that's why this topic is so important because, like we stated in the beginning, to one person, maybe losing a pet or losing a job or losing a way of life or whatever may not be as impactful as the next person. So to be cognizant of what grief is, what it looks like, what it can be, so that we can like recognize it when it happens and so that we don't have to be that person that's reflecting and saying, oopsie.
Yes.
I,
And so, what I really learned was sometimes it's better if you don't say anything.
don't
If you
preach.
if
Say it again for the
if,
people in the
if
back.
you if you act if actually I had just listened and said, okay,
Yeah.
just say what's on your heart, and then just got quiet and said, I don't know what to say, but
Yeah.
I'm here. That would have been 1,000 times better
Yeah.
than trying to find words that then aren't authentic or that come out
Right.
wrong. And that was just from my own personal experience that I learned sometimes just being quiet and just holding the person or being with the person
Yeah.
or doing something nice for them can bridge that awkwardness where you don't understand or you're not feeling like you can offer anything. There's a lot of things you can offer, and like I said, sometimes it's silence and just saying I'm here when you need me, and I'll listen.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in since we're already kind of talking about it. Let's jump into like what to do, what not to do, and just like list some things. I know I wanted to say for me, and I know that the grief is. I don't want to minimize my experience, but I know that the grief that I've experienced recently is not anything.
All grief is different.
Yes,
So that's
all
one
grief
thing I
is different.
learned. Like you can't qualify it or
Yeah,
quantify it because everyone's emotions are valuable.
right,
And so whatever your emotion is that you're
right,
going through, that
right.
still holds value. It's just you may not see it as valuable as someone else's, but it all has value.
That's a great point. And so let me like rethink because that's a great point. I'm like in the middle of minimizing myself, saying like, let me not minimize. Okay, um, my grief was very different than your grief.
There you go.
But thank you. Growing. um,
I try.
but one of the things that I found that I was saying over and over in my head when I had encounters with people was like kind of mimicking what you said, which is like stop trying to make it better. You really can't make it better. Let's just be honest.
Yeah,
Uh,
you
and
can.
so and so let's not make it worse, you know, and forcing that other person to feel like they have to validate you trying to make it better when it doesn't really make it better, you know. And so like in all of that, like letting people grieve in their own way. And if that means crying, if that means, you know, not wanting to go out right now, or if that means wanting to go out more than you used to, like whatever it is, like, you know, kind of leaning in to whatever that person and letting them tell you what they need.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. I do think that that's always a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of allowing the person to let you know what they need.
Yeah.
Definitely also like, and I think part of it too is people feel guilty, right? They feel guilty
Mm,
because they know that there's something now that's missing.
yeah.
And so sometimes they want to fill that gap or they want to try to
Mm,
figure out how to fill that gap. And sometimes you can't. And even with like my nieces and nephews, when I was checking in with them, or even when I was checking in with my parents or with my brother, I tried to make sure to just be like, hi, how, like I would sometimes start with just a normal conversation. Hi, how are you? What's going on? This and that. I might not in that one conversation bring up the topic.
yeah.
And then at another time, I might say, hey, just checking in to make sure how you're doing with like everything with dad and sometimes they would say, oh, things are, or other times they say, yeah, I kind of need to talk about that. Or I do want to get this off my chest. And then, and honestly, I was in a lot of contact with my niece. She and I are extremely close. And so, well, I'm close to all my nieces and nephews, but I always say that she was the daughter I was meant to have.
Oh,
Because we're just very similar in a lot of ways. And so I would talk to her a lot. And I know for her, her grieving process was very different. And she actually didn't get closure in hers. And there was actually a news cast on it because she had called my brother's number. So I was glad to know I wasn't the only one that didn't erase his phone number from my phone. It's still in my phone.
yeah.
And she had called the number to give just an update and not expecting for anyone to pick up the phone. And a gentleman did pick up the phone. And she said, oh, this was my dad's phone number. And he said, oh, and I guess at the moment he asked, is he still with us? And she said, no. And he said, and he basically let her say what she needed to say, which would have been said to her dad. And so she made a
That's,
post on Facebook about that experience, and a local newscast picked it up. And I think that's when she finally got her closure, when she really got to talk
you're
about
about to
the
make me cry.
experience. Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely was a moment, and I think for her it was her closure.
Yeah.
So for me, it was my letter. For her, it was that. I don't know with my nephew and my other niece quite what their closure has been, has it is or hasn't been.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. People think that closure has a time frame. It
Yeah.
doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't have a time frame. Like
Yeah.
someone can have closure within a year, someone could have closure within 50 years.
Yeah.
It just kind of depends on the person and the process, and that's okay. But yeah, with her, that was definitely her closure. And with me, it was the letter. Like I just sat down one day and
Yeah.
I finally had the words. I finally knew what I wanted to say. And I didn't get up from there until I wrote it all down. And then the funny thing, I kept that for another couple of years. I didn't share it with anybody. I just had it, or actually, I think I had shared the written portion, like on Facebook. I had shared like the written portion when Facebook used to have that notes section. You know, they're always
Mm-hmm.
changing something. Um, and then I never really thought about it. And then there was one of the anniversaries that were coming up of his passing, and I decided that I was going to share it on a Facebook Live, which that Facebook Live was interesting. So I wasn't really expecting that this is what I was going to do. I was just going to kind of talk a little bit, but
Yeah.
then I got it out and I started reading it. Now, unbeknownst to my husband, he did not know I was doing this.
Yeah.
So, and he's a jokester. So, and I'll tell you, having a jokester in your life also helps a lot, because a lot of times where I was crying, like in a very subtle, like very him way, he would make me laugh or bring some
Yeah.
laughter and levity to it where I appreciated it. Because
Right.
he knew, because that's the other thing too. Someone who knows you for a long time will know when the right time is, right? Don't try to
Right.
do this if you don't know the person really well. Like,
Right. Like
don't
don't
try to make it a funny moment.
right.
Again, know your audience.
No, like read the room. Yep.
Yeah, don't do it otherwise. But he knows me really well, so I'm doing this, and in the middle of doing it and reading it, I did get emotional, and I did start tearing up, and I was kind of crying. Now, I all of a sudden behind me comes my husband. Now, my husband does different characters playing around, and he's got like some wigs and stuff. Like when I tell you he's a jokester, he's a jokester. So all of a sudden, I see this character in a blonde wig come behind me. Hey, everybody on Facebook, how are you? Da, da, da. And I'm in this middle of this really deep moment and like
Yeah.
crying. And then he looked at me and goes, "Oh my God, you're crying. What's going on?" I said, "Oh, and then I told him, he goes, "Oh."
He's like, ah, crap.
He was like, "Oh boy." But then I told him, I said, "No, actually, that was good because it let me finish, because I kind of get that break." And that's why I
Yeah.
love the name of this, laughing and crying and laughing, because it's true. Like you kind of
Yeah.
mix those things in together
Right.
sometimes. And for me, that was the break I needed to
Mm.
just kind of have that laugh and then go back to finishing. And after I did the post, I was really surprised at how many people like messaged me and said, "Thank you for doing that. Like I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that." Because in there I had talked about how it really felt like I was drowning. Like it really did. And there were times where I would walk into work, and a lot of times my coworkers say like, "Oh, you're always smiling. You're always happy. You're always," yeah, to an
Yeah. You're
extent.
like, oh, only you knew.
Yeah, like to an extent, of course. But there were days I'd walk into work, happy, smiley. I'd go into the bathroom, cry my eyes out, dry my eyes, come back smiley and happy. And so then it kind of became like a mask where I was like, okay, I need to be a certain way. I need to be normal to be able to get through a day, but I'm
Yeah.
still having these moments of this grief that's coming, and I need to figure out how to deal with this. Because I mean, I was still very good at, um, taking care of my son, doing all the things I needed with my son, playing with him, doing all that. A lot of times it would be more at night when, you're kind of alone with your thoughts, and, all the things are kind of coming. Now, of course, my husband saw it all. He knew
Right.
what I was going through. He knew I was a hot mess. Um, and that I wasn't quite processing everything
Yeah.
well. So what he did, especially the first year, I'll tell you that for sure. The first year is one of the hardest. It's the most
Mm.
difficult, because I had that urge to pick up the phone I had
Yeah.
that urge to tell him news. I had the urge to, do all of those
All
things
the
that we
first
would do.
holidays, all the
Right,
yeah.
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then of course my birthday was rolling around.
Mm.
So I was not in the mood for a celebration. I told my husband, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I feel weird. I really don't feel like celebrating or doing anything. And I remember he was talking about going, because he knows I like to hike. So he was talking about, well, let's go hiking. Let's go, because my brother was, so now when I tell you he was an adventurer, I mean, hiking, golf, jet skiing.
Yeah.
He was that guy that would like, I bet you if he could have jumped out of a plane, he would have.
Right, right.
Yeah, like just the life of the party, would walk
Yeah.
in and it was like, oh, Dickie's here. Like, here's the life of the party. The party doesn't quite start till he gets here. And so, he had that really big, bright personality. And then I just didn't feel bright. I didn't feel it. I was like, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do
Like
anything.
something still missing. Mhm.
Yeah, I was like, not really. So then he said, well, let's go hiking. Your brother loved hiking. He loved all that stuff. Let's just kind of do it in his memory type of a thing. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I can still celebrate my
Mm.
birthday and celebrate him.
Yeah.
Well, there was a package that he was waiting for, my husband. And he's like, there's a package that's coming. And I'm like, a package?
Right.
And I think when he said what was in the package, I was like kind of taken aback because I thought, I don't like those kinds of things. But okay, I'm not going to say anything. He's getting me
Right.
some kind of gift. Well, when the package arrived, and he said, "Hey, the package is here. Go ahead, open it." And so I'm opening it, and when I look in, I start crying. Like I'm crying. Like I'm crying. He's like, "You don't like it?"
What's it?
And
What
I'm
is
like,
it?
"No, I love it." It was a camera,
Okay.
and so I had not taken photos in a while. I love photography. I love taking pictures. I love all things photography. I love taking. I just
Beautiful
love.
pictures you take.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I love telling a story, right?
Yeah.
So, anything that I can do to do that, whether it's with a pen or with a camera, I'm all in. But I had not done it in a while. And
Mm.
I think at that point, I didn't even own a point and shoot. I think I'd even either lost it or didn't even care about it at that point.
Yeah.
We went hiking and took tons of pictures. And then the camera pretty much didn't leave my side from that
So
point on.
awesome.
I just started, yeah, and he's since upgraded my camera a couple of times. But it felt good. Like it felt good to be in nature. It felt good to have the camera. And honestly, it was the first time in a long time that I had felt connected to him. And
Mm.
even though he physically wasn't there, I felt really connected to him. And then the second part of that was I had a friend at work, very good friend. We're still really good friends. We're actually having lunch next month. And she kept asking me to go to church with her. And I will tell you, God and I had a not a very good
Yeah.
relationship for a very long time. And so I was like, no, but thank
I'm
you.
good.
Yeah. And so she asked me, I think a total of 5 times in different occasions. The fifth time she asked, she said, there's a location that's going to be built and done like in a week, and it's right up the street from where you live.
Mm.
And I said, oh God, how am I going to say no to her now?
How am I gonna say no to up the street and possible brunch?
It was one of those things where you're just like, oh, I don't know. Okay. And then
All
I thought,
right.
well, maybe to appease and to stop, because if I say I've gone, then,
Yeah. She won't ask anymore. Yep.
right, right. So, and I'll take my son. We'll make it a whole day because it was
Yep.
like little places near there that you could eat.
Yeah.
So there we go, and we walked because it was a beautiful day. I was like, all right, let's go. So we walk. We go into this church, very different than what I'm used to. It's a Christian church, and so I walk in and I'm like, oh, this is not what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I said, so let me give it a chance. And my son is next to me and he's like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then the music starts. By the third song, I'm in tears.
Falling.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like in tears by like the third song that's on. And then the sermon comes on. Everything in that sermon hit one part of how I was feeling.
Yeah.
And I actually, I'm a note taker. So I had brought a notebook with me. I had no intention of using it. I had no
Yeah.
intention. I probably filled up about 2 pages
Wow.
while I was there.
That's amazing.
And it was at the end, it was kind of upbeat because that day they, I don't know, they threw beach balls or something. I don't remember what it was. So
Yeah.
my son was having a blast. And I just remember thinking, I need to come back. And here I am, and I still listen to the sermons, and I still get a lot out of it. And so it was one of those things where I think even in the sermon, in one part, he said, God will meet you in the middle of your, and he didn't say dysfunction. I think he may have said chaos. And I thought, this must be my middle.
Yeah.
This must be my middle because
That's so
this
good,
feels
Yaviri.
chaotic.
Yeah.
Um, and then I felt alive again between the camera,
Mm.
between the, I kind of started like feeling like myself again.
Yeah.
I started feeling like he would want me to have these adventures.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think I live life a little bit more. I take a little bit more risks now.
Yeah.
I take a lot more risks now.
Like he left that with
Um,
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's because of him.
Yeah.
It really is just kind of his, his spirit of adventure and his spirit of loving life. Because I thought, it is, which it's short. We don't know when,
Mhm.
but why not make it worth it while you're here? Like, have fun, like
Yeah.
do the things, right? I mean, we just did a fashion show.
Yeah.
I would
I was at a
never have
fashion show,
thought.
you guys. If you don't know, check
She
out
sure
my
was, and
social
she rocked
media
it,
or my Patreon because it's up there.
and she rocked it. But like
We
I
both
would have
did.
normally
Yes.
said no. I would have probably normally been like, no, maybe not, maybe next time. And then I thought, no, he would want me to do that. And
We
he would
want
actually
you.
have called me the next day and said, I saw the video, you did great. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna start saying more yes to the things
Yeah.
that I really want to do. Even on my hikes, like I have become so much more adventurous on the hikes that I go on. Um, I remember my very first hike, I was like so scared to like go beyond and I'm not, be safe when you're
Yeah.
going on hikes. Don't do anything that you shouldn't
Don't go
do.
past the signs and the ropes that they put
Right,
up, guys.
right. If it says it's dangerous and you could die, please take that seriously.
Right.
However, like certain things, like I'm somewhat fearful of heights. Okay, heights is not my greatest,
Not your
and
ministry.
so, oh yeah, I'm not. Heights and me, I still am getting kind of over that, but I've done some things to help me with that. Like even with the hikes, like there might be somewhere where I'll go and take a photo where I normally wouldn't have
Wouldn't
climbed
know.
to do that because I would have been too scared to do it. Or and I had the proper equipment. That's the
Yeah.
other thing, people. Proper equipment. um, but things like that, or just it's just taking like these other risks. Like even with photography, I've taken some risks with photography. Normally I was like, yeah, I'll wait to do that.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe I'm not going to do that right now. And now I'm like, no, if an opportunity comes where I can showcase my talent, I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Because when will I get another chance?
Right. I love that. And I love that you're getting into where your hope is, because that was like my next question is like, where do we find hope after grief? But before we do that, I know some of my listeners, there are the note takers, they're the organization
Ah,
people. They're like, you told me you was giving me tips. Okay, I got you. I got
yes.
you. Listen, like we spoke on not trying to make it better, allowing people to
Mm-hmm.
grieve and cope in their own way, being quiet, listening. And I think one of the things that you didn't necessarily say, but you said through how you experienced things with your friend and your husband is just like being there, like
Mm-hmm.
having an open invitation that, like, I'm here 3 o'clock in the morning, you know what I mean? Whatever time, like, I'm here, like, and giving that person that invitation that they can really, really count on you and being
Yeah.
that friend. even if it is the friend that's
Absolutely.
like, hey, we still got church over here if you want to come.
Right, right. It is. It's just the
Yeah.
different offering, but also for the person who is going through it.
Yeah.
Um, for me, I really did find or started finding my joy again in the things that I loved.
Yeah.
So, like the photography. Instead of
Okay.
letting that go
Yeah.
by the wayside, that was something that brought me much closer to him and much closer to myself.
That's a really
Um,
cool point.
Journaling was something that
Mm,
I know not everyone loves to journal, but for your note takers, even prior to writing like the letter, I found solace in writing down either emotions, and sometimes it was just a word. Like it wasn't even a whole like
yeah.
sentence or a whole, it was just maybe a word for that day that kind of helped me release. I'm also a very physical person, so for me, running. I really enjoy running, and I find that when I am chaotic or when I have things that are deeply troubling me, a run helps me to center myself,
Yeah.
to just sort of be able to have that moment where I don't necessarily need to think because I'm thinking about my run. I'm thinking about my feet placement. I'm thinking about my hand placement. I might be listening to a podcast or I might be
Right.
listening to music.
Laughing and crying. What
Um,
up?
yep, that's it. Put it on the podcast while you're running. Also, something that might not be so obvious all the time, if the grief is becoming too much, if the grief is something that you're really just not able to get a handle on, you should seek professional help.
Yeah.
You really should. I, in my own experience, luckily for that situation, did not have to do that, um, and didn't feel like it got to that level where I needed to do that. However, everyone's grief, like we said, is different. If you
Mhm.
need that third, that second, that other person to just help you, you can do that. Now, something I did do, and this was years later, and I was already feeling like I was in a good place. A friend of mine, she did a class about trauma and grief, and she
Mm.
invited me to be a part of it. And I thought, this is good. Like, let me do this.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I learned a lot about the process I had gone through
Right.
and the fact that it was still going. It was still going to be ongoing. There's still going to
Yeah.
be moments. Like, I'll have a time where a song will come on the radio and it'll still trigger.
Yeah.
And so I'll be in the car and I'm like bawling my eyes out and trying to clean my face before I get into work. And
Yeah.
it's not that same type of it's so interesting because it's not the same kind of crying that I did in the
It's like
beginning.
more of a joyful one.
It's more of like a release or of a like, okay, I'm remembering, I'm having a memory, but it doesn't feel like I can't get through the day.
Yeah. And I was gonna also offer to the people because I know you said if it gets that bad, like if you don't know where your grief is, if you don't know, because sometimes it's like we're like, well, it's not gotten that bad. Don't wait. Um,
Yeah.
Professional help is available to you, and you're not weak, and you're not stupid, and it's not too much. Like if you need to go, just talk to someone, and you don't have the
Hmm.
support system that you wish you did, it's perfectly okay. You're not crazy to go and seek therapy. Like you guys know me. I'm a therapy queen, okay? I love Jesus, but I'm a therapy queen, so I know my
Hey,
limits.
it's all right. Hey, he put people to be therapists on earth
Hey,
for a reason.
listen. The Lord, they're
That's
anointed.
somebody's
The Lord
calling.
anointed them.
Yep, yep. It was their calling, and for some reason, it's their calling. It really is. And the
But
other thing I would even say is when you find someone, just make sure it's the right fit.
yeah,
The, don't
don't
give
force
up.
it.
If the
Hmm.
first person isn't right for you, because sometimes it takes a little time to have
It's
rapport
a
with somebody.
relationship. Yeah, for
It
sure.
is. And so I think people sometimes go into it thinking, oh, it's going to be right off the bat, we're going to click. No, that might not happen. So really do like not get discouraged if on
Yeah,
that first attempt it didn't click. You may need to just look again and find someone that you end up clicking with because I,
yeah,
I would hate for someone to think, oh, this process doesn't work just because they didn't click with a particular
yeah.
person.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely take note of that advice because that's super good. And I loved what you just did on the sneak tip and flipped my whole tips on its head and say, you know what? There are tips for the people who are helping people with grief, but there are also tips for the people going through the grief. And I think that's super dope because I would not have thought to do that. And I just love what you said about like leaning into the things that you loved even before you experienced the grief.
Yeah.
And like you said, seeking professional help, journaling, even if it's just one word, even if it's a picture, if you're an illustrator, like, or photography, lean into those things because you don't know what that's going to pull out of you and you don't know what kind of relief it's going to give you. And then also just allowing yourself, I know you're not saying this, but I can hear it in what you're saying. It's like allowing yourself to slowly think about that person again and think about the things, the impact they had on you, and even lean into that. Like I love how you're like, I'm gonna get into nature because he was an adventurer, and it's almost like your way of paying homage to their
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I found that I'd prefer to celebrate his life than his death.
stop it. Say it again. I just want you to say it again.
Yeah, celebrate their life instead of their death. Because I think I was stuck in that. And honestly, this is the first year that I did not do any kind of a post on the anniversary of his death.
You're
And
awesome.
that's how I knew I was in a good place.
You're awesome.
Because
You
I would
kept. Oh,
rather
sorry.
do it on his birthday.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. I love that. I love that you're in the place that you can do that. And I'm rooting on for anybody who's listening who's like, I'm not there yet, but just take hope and joy in your very story and know that you can get there and that like you're gonna get there if you keep chipping away at it, if you keep leaning into it. There's one thing I want to do because you brought up this letter so much, and when I read this letter, I literally cried. It wasn't laughing and crying; it was crying. And I kept saying like I'm gonna read. I just want to read a passage of it. First of all, I definitely want to ask your permission because I didn't
Oh,
before.
yes,
If
yes,
it's
you
okay,
certainly can. Yes, you
okay.
can.
But I've actually like changed that thought as I've been talking to you, and I kind of want you to read this passage. Is it okay if that happens?
It would be fine. I don't have it in front of me though.
Oh yeah, I'm totally gonna send it to you, girl. You know I'm on top of
Oh,
this.
okay.
Okay.
Of course you are.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Okay, so as far back as I can remember, my two older brothers and I were a trio. In pictures, I was usually in the middle since I was the only girl and the youngest. When my brother passed away, my other brother and I instantly became a duo. As part of my past, present, and future was gone. Worse were the
Mm,
lingering questions of why and what if. Continuing the interrogation in my head was more unbearable than the actual loss. To the outside world, I was still my happy, smiley self, but when I was alone, the facade would crumble. An invitation from a friend to attend her church changed it all. At first, I was resistant. I was hurting and I was angry. As I continued to attend and listen to the sermons, every message spoke to me, and in turn, I began to speak to God. I turned the nagging questions swirling in my mind into statements. I
mm,
did all I could do. He was loved deeply and he knew it.
mm.
He was generous, he lived a good life, and he loved me. Every day I began to feel more like myself. The self before death stormed into my life. My smile slowly became genuine again. I was able to see beyond the grief and cherish the gift my brother had given me, joy.
How do you feel reading that and hearing that as you read it?
Um, it kind of brings back all the emotions again when
Yeah, yeah.
for sure.
I'm with you.
Yeah, it definitely brings it back. Like as far as, but in a way where if I had read that when I first wrote it, it would have hit me different.
Yeah,
I think now it just hits me in a way like, oh wow, like I've come this far.
yeah.
And I actually know that he'd be super proud of me. And he'd be like, yeah, like you're living your life, like you're doing all the things um that he definitely always thought I was capable of. And that's both my brothers. They're very encouraging, like with
Yeah.
the things that I do, which is why, of course, like the very first story when I talked about my husband and my brothers is because honestly, they have played such an important role in my life. and in supporting and in and you know, my dad too, but um they bonded in a way that to me I thought was so special. And you know, even when I had the loss, it was a loss for my husband too,
Yeah.
because we've known each other since we were 17. He's known
Yeah.
my brothers for the same amount of time. So
You know, they got
it
drunk in
was,
them.
yeah, yeah, they sure did. And I'm sure my brother's still laughing about that.
Right.
Like he really is still laughing about that. But it was, they just had such like a close bond. And so for me, the fact that I had someone that I could lean on, and that's another thing for people. If you know of someone that you're close to or someone that you're comfortable with that's experienced, or if you find people or feel like you need people that have gone through the same thing, that's okay. Seek them out.
Yeah.
Seek them out. Most times people want to be there for someone. They just don't always know how.
Yeah. And I definitely want to piggyback out off of that and just say, like, even if somebody's not showing up in the way that you think is most impactful for you or that would help you the most, it doesn't mean they don't want to be there in some capacity. Like, give them a chance
Yeah,
and tell them what you need, because
absolutely.
they might actually, you know, do it,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, you just never know. I mean, I definitely had some people that supported me in different ways. And then the other thing was I didn't realize that I'd become that support for people.
Yeah.
So I had a friend who was going through it with someone that she considered a father figure. And I remember she knew I had gone through it with my brother, and different type of cancer, but still cancer. And I really did become a support system for her.
Yeah.
And it just happened organically. It wasn't forced. It wasn't like, I'm going to become your mentor
Right.
because I know something about this. Please don't do
Right.
that. Um, it really was, hey, I know that you went through this. Can you just tell me some of the process, or can you talk to me? Can you pray for me? Can
Yeah.
you, yeah, I can do all of those things. And so sometimes people just want to know that you're, if you've experienced it, that they can
That
just
you're
say,
there,
hey, I need a little hand right now because I'm not feeling so great. And I can
basically.
say, yeah, I know.
Podcast land, listen, this is literally why I do this. What she's saying is, like, when we really work on healing ourselves in our relationships and working on being vulnerable and having boundaries and dealing with our grief and dealing, when we do all of that, we can show up with people and show up for people in such powerful ways and have, so I say at the end of all my podcasts, maybe we could change the world or something. And it's not, although it's cheeky, it's really truly meant to be a statement. We can change the world one person at a time through our relationships. And so I just love that you said that. And I love that you were here today. And I love that you were so vulnerable and told that story and even risked a little tear too, because, you know, your girl Niche did. Um,
Yeah, a little more. Well, I think we had a good balance. I think we did
yeah,
all right.
I think we laughed and cried appropriately.
I think so. I think so.
But thank you. Is there anything you want to leave with the audience that you didn't get a chance to say?
I would just say that, you know, it, like I said early on, grief isn't always talked about. It's not a fun topic.
Yeah.
It's not a sexy topic.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, I mean, who want, like, oh, when you're at the dinner table, we don't want to talk
Right.
about,
Well, let's talk about a little grief.
right, right. But just, I think in general, the thought about, you know, the fact that grieving, because we said grieving can be different things, right? That it's a normal emotion. I think I just want people to know it's normal.
Yeah.
When you're feeling sad, all emotions to me are normal.
Yeah.
I had to really learn that because I really did, you know, and in the time I grew up, you know, you have good and bad emotions. Like if you get angry, if you're sad, if you're, those are bad.
Yeah.
If you're
Right.
happy and if you're joyful, those are good.
Good. Yeah.
Well, that's a crock of, you know what?
Crockett crab.
Yeah, because emotions are emotions and we have them. We all have them, whether they're happy, sad, whatever they are. And for me, like I really learned that you have to feel the feels.
Yeah.
You have to feel them. They're hard. And when they're not so euphoric. they're
Yeah.
not they're not pleasant,
Yeah.
but there's always some good on the other side of it. I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like once you experience it, and I'll leave you with this. And this happened yesterday, so I didn't even know that I would bring this up. On my hiking trip yesterday, there was a forecast of rain to where we were going to go.
Hmm.
And when we got on the road, it was about a 2.5 hour drive. We get on the road and everything was clear blue skies, wonderful. Halfway through, when I tell you it was thunder and lightning and rain, I mean, it was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, for a second, I thought we might have to turn around
Right,
because
right.
it's getting really bad. I can see the lightning. And so the woman who coordinated everything was texting one of the passengers, do not text and drive, um, was texting one of my passengers and saying, it is going to clear once we pass a certain point. And so
Mm.
I didn't think anything about that. I was like, okay. And she was right. Within like 30 minutes of the drive, the sun comes out, the rain stopped. It's beautiful. And we were commenting about it all day. Like, this is a perfect day. This is wonderful. Thank God we went through the storm. And I thought about it. What a metaphor for life. You
I
going
was
through the
thinking about
storm,
that.
going through the storm. And it really was such a representation because it was like night and day from when we went through it to the point where I've never had to put my hazard lights on before.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
And I love when you
And
said when you got to a certain point. Not that like you
yes,
knew what the point was, but like you get to a certain point and it
hmm
clears.
and it clears.
Preach.
And I'll tell you, yesterday I had goosebumps when it happened because I thought, and then actually it was funny because I was saying, I said, well, maybe my brother helped clear it out a little bit because he was like, no, she's got to go on this hike because I brought two people that had never gone before and were dying to go on this hike. And so I said, there's always a purpose in things, and I know
Yeah.
people don't always like to hear that, and they're like, well, I don't know what this purpose is, and I don't want to know, and that's just the anger, and I get it because I was angry, and when I was in my anger, you couldn't tell me nothing.
Yeah.
Like I
Like don't
just
talk to
want to be
me.
right,
I ain't
like
the
I just want
one.
to be angry. Um, but yeah, feel it, but don't live in it, and then and you'll definitely come out of it. I feel like, at least for me, I came out of it a much stronger,
Yeah.
um, more joyful.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always good and bad. So I'm not like thinking, oh, everything's unicorns and rainbows, although I do love myself a unicorn.
Only you hear you guys. Only her.
Only, only somehow I will find a way to fit in a unicorn. But there really is this transformation that happens. And I really love like butterflies. And I really do see and feel that there is a transformation that happens with grief. And no matter how long it takes you, when you do look back and you reflect, I feel you're just going to be so proud of everything and see how everything kind of ties together. And all I can tell people is no matter what happens in your life, live your best life.
That's such a beautiful message to leave with people in all stages. And I don't even say stages because grief is not linear, but just like all different points of their grief cycle. Such a beautiful message to leave with them that it clears, that you gotta live. And podcast line, I hate to ask you how you feel, like I do so very often. Because God, we don't know. But relationships are tricky. And I hope you had something to take away from this conversation that we had today. And I hope you laughed a lot. I hope you cried if you need to. And make no mistake, I would love to hear what you love most about this podcast episode. And if there's a topic that you're like, Nisha, you talk about a lot of stuff, but you haven't talked about this, I want to hear that. I'm here for that. Hit me up on Instagram where I'm most active at Unleash the Niche. And you can also find me pretty much on any other platform, also at Unleash the Niche. That's Unleash THA Niche. And Yaviri, where can we find you?
So I am actually more active on Instagram as
Okay.
well. And it's actually at Y. Escalera, so Yescalera, and then 22.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually you'll find a lot of my hikes, photography, oils. Basically, it's just a representation of me on there.
I
So,
love it.
and some
And you know
positive
I'm a
vibes.
I'm a tagger everywhere, so you'll find her. If you don't find her, do that, you'll find her. But if you think more people should listen to the show, you can help get the podcast noticed by sending an episode to a friend, by writing a review on Apple Podcasts, giving it 5 stars on Spotify, or by continuing to share on social media. And if you want to go deeper, laugh harder, join me over on Patreon, because Patreon's dope. Listen, you spend what, $8 on Starbucks now? Patreon's 10, and you get vlogs, the podcast early, and so much more. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. I guess that's it. Oh, how sad. Let me tell you, before I go, you and hubby will be on the podcast again. I'm hearing the drug story.
Okay. I'll have to let him know. I'll have to let him know.
I gotta check with the schedules because he's coming.
And I'll have to. Would you like him with or without a wig?
Listen, I'm here for the wig at this point. I don't think I'd be able to concentrate.
To start it off.
This is amazing. I love you guys. Maybe I'll bring Dre on. I'll bring Dre on and you guys, and we'll have.
Oh, that would be awesome.
That would be awesome. That would happen. Awesome.
All right, we're here.
I love it. And like I said, that's it. Maybe we can impact the water or something. I'll leave you with that. Bye.